Hello, everyone. This is Milo of Milo's Mystery Box. I hope you're all doing well tonight. But I'm making this video because I wanted to talk about some of my own thoughts of my own struggles with executive functioning, especially because I'm neurodivergent, and a lot of neurodivergent people struggle with executive functioning issues. Some may struggle with it worse than others. I'm not going to specify what I am as neurodivergent just yet. I will eventually, but essentially I've been thinking about this more and more, especially as I've gotten more used to the whole like 9 to 5 type of grind, and working in most of my days during the week overall, and which I know might be very fortunate, especially with all the people who have been laid off as a result of this crap economy right now. But I never really noticed this when I was younger because, well, of course, you don't really notice this type of thing when you're asleep or you're not engaging in it, but versus when you're awake or you are engaging in it. But I never really realized until I graduated from college years ago that, in a lot of ways, for someone like me, it's like, how much more energy you have to put into in order to actually, force yourself to have like a good routine, to be able and like motivate yourself to be able to wake up every morning, go to work, do what you're supposed to do at work, then come home, and then do whatever else just to get through the day, get through the week. I'm the type of person where it's like, because a lot of my time, especially helping my dad run his business, we've had our business for 4 generations, which most family businesses don't even survive beyond like 1 generation or 2 generations. But it's like having to to devote a lot of time to helping my dad run his business, and also helping, how do I say it, manage the workflow, and also because we also, my brother works with us, so it's like part of it too is like playing a balancing act. I just kind of feel like it's like you just kind of don't realize how much like little time you have, when you have to work all the time like that versus when you don't. Because I feel like when you're not working, it's like you have this, everyone has a sense, oh, I've got all this freedom and I can do what I want. Well, but then you realize until you can't, because everything, most things cost money, especially in this day and age. Yeah, I mean there are some free stuff out there still, like parks and whatnot, but only so many parks depending on where you live, and sometimes the same old thing can get old or irritating after a while. I know not for everyone. There's a lot of people who like routine, but anyways, kind of get back on point though. I never realized until I graduated college and gotten my first job before the one I'm in now, and I realized even more with the job I'm in now, just how much little time you have. Like even on the weekends, like because I'm the type of person who also exercises consistently, both with weights and cardio, and then have to attend to my licensing studies. I kind of feel like, a lot of people take what they're given in life, the time that they have. I feel like a lot of people take that for granted. Because sometimes I'll see people on this platform complain about, oh, my life's not going the way I wanted it to. Especially those of you who are in Gen Z like me, you've probably seen people complain about that. You might have even complained about that yourself. But I feel like what a lot of people are missing is that it is good to have fun. And if you have the privilege to be able to allot yourself that kind of time to have fun in life before the responsibilities come about, that's great. But I feel like with the way a lot of things are going nowadays, where a lot more people are struggling and a lot more people aren't living that whole American dream lifestyle like our parents and grandparents and even before have lived. I feel like what a lot of people take for granted is that, and I've seen this with people that have been close to me, they take for granted what they had experienced growing up as a kid, when a lot more people had access to that kind of, dream per se. But I feel like too, then the expectation of how life is when you're a kid and you kind of go off into adulthood, that it's kind of soul crushing for a lot of people. And in a lot of ways, I get why, because, we're essentially told one thing growing up, those of us who grew up in the education system, being exposed to, that type of message and rhetoric, and even within, mass media of the American dream and whatnot, and, opportunity, just go to college or go to vocational school and everything will be better. I mean, with certain degrees, certain education paths, I guess that's true, especially related to business, finance, construction, engineering. Yeah, and used to be tech at one point like that too. But until you realize that that's only true beyond a certain point, and we really don't live at a point in history anymore where people can just find whatever job locally that they could beforehand. We don't have that type of factory work like we used to, and a lot more people have had to get degrees since the 1970s and 1980s. But now it's like 40, 50 years later, now even that's starting to come into question more as we see more people doing that kind of stuff. And all I have to say is, as someone who has to has to help run a business and deal with my own executive functioning problems as someone who's neurodivergent, it's kind of like you have to get used to it to a certain degree, because you got to be able to pay your bills, you got to be able to pay your debts, you got to be able to survive. And I know it can be really hard to bring yourself to that conclusion, and it can be hard to bring yourself to wake up to that kind of reality every day. But eventually, whether you like it or not, you do get used to it eventually. You have to get used to it eventually, because unless if something major were to change, that's probably how life is going to be for the majority of people now. And I don't mean to sound like a doomer or anything. I don't mean to sound pessimistic like this, but kind of something I realized over time, because I kind of used to think more like that before I mentally maturing, growing as a person more. And sometimes, yeah, it can be a real struggle to function, to survive. But at the same time, too, it's like, I think having responsibility, and having something meaningful, I know that's easier said than done, especially coming from my position. I feel like if you're able to have meaning and purpose in some way, then that might actually solve a lot of one's dilemmas. And I definitely feel like before I got involved in my family's real estate appraisal business, that there was this kind of like a lack of, fulfillment, lack of purpose, lack of meaning, that type of thing. And I know a lot of people are struggling like that, especially because a lot of people, don't come from families where they might have their own business. And I get why, that's why people are going on the content creation route, so they can have that adjacent alternative route, if they can strike it successfully. And that's if they strike it successfully. Just like those who start businesses or, inherit businesses, a lot of that, a lot of success is kind of based off of luck and playing your cards right. And not everybody's a winner. But anyways, what I can say to close this off is, even if you feel like life can be depressing, life can be all doom and gloom, and you might not have time to do all the things that you want. Here's the thing: most of y'all who probably come across this are probably in my age range, my generation, Generation Z, 20s, early 30s. Know that you do have time. It's just all about how you spend your time wisely and what you do to curb your own issues and problems too, because we all have our own issues and problems. It's just about how do we effectively solve those problems, how do we manage our problems with ourselves, with other people close to us. But even still, I think there's some aspects of this that aren't as bad as some people think. But I also do realize, with what the kind of life I lived before getting into my current position, I kind of realized too that, yeah, and there's a lot of situations that aren't great. And if you're able to get yourself out of a bad situation, whether that's by job hopping, or being content creator, self-employed, just do what you can to alleviate yourself from the worst possible situation for the best possible situation. That's all I can really say. But yeah, I know I kind of went off track a bit, but I feel like talking about this was relevant, because it's like sometimes you don't really know, what to do, how to put yourself together. Sometimes you don't know why why you might be doing something, but at the end of the day, we all got to do what we got to do to survive. But anyways, hope you all enjoyed the video. I know it's been a little bit since I posted, responsibilities. But anyways, hope you all have a great night.